A black waitress named Lisa is humiliated by a group of white millionaires in a luxury restaurant. But moments later, when an unbelievable twist leaves everyone stunned, the tables turn in a way no one saw coming. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Lisa's tired eyes scanned the elegant dining room of the LeBlanc restaurant. The crystal chandeliers sparkled above, casting a warm glow on the white tablecloths and polished silverware. She smoothed her crisp black apron and took a deep breath, ready to face another long night of serving wealthy guests. At 23, Lisa was no stranger to hard work. She'd grown up in a small town, the daughter of a factory worker and a school teacher. From a young age, she'd dreamed of becoming a doctor, inspired by the kind physician who had treated her grandmother's illness. Now, in her second year of medical school, that dream was closer than ever. But the path wasn't easy. As she balanced a tray of champagne flutes, Lisa's mind wandered to the anatomy exam waiting for her tomorrow morning. She'd been up until 2 a.m. studying the night before, only to wake at 6 for her early shift at the hotel. The constant juggling act between work and school left her exhausted, but she refused to give up. "Excuse me, miss." A guest's voice snapped Lisa back to the present. She plastered on her most genuine smile and approached the table. "Yes, sir. How may I help you?" As she took the order, Lisa couldn't help but notice the guest's expensive watch and tailored suit. She pushed away a twinge of envy, reminding herself that her own success would come through perseverance and hard work. Between refilling water glasses and clearing plates, Lisa's thoughts drifted to her tiny studio apartment, where textbooks and notes covered every surface. She longed for a quiet moment to review her flashcards, but there were still hours left in her shift. Despite the challenges, Lisa's kindness never wavered. She treated each guest with genuine care, from the fussy child throwing a tantrum to the elderly couple celebrating their anniversary. Her empathy, she knew, would serve her well as a doctor someday. As the night wore on, Lisa's feet ached in her sensible black shoes. But with each step, she imagined herself walking the halls of a hospital, finally living her dream of helping others. The thought gave her strength to keep going, even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Karen, the restaurant manager, approached Lisa with a mixture of excitement and concern in her eyes. She placed a gentle hand on Lisa's shoulder, pulling her aside. "Lisa, I have a special assignment for you tonight," Karen said, her voice low. "We have a group of VIP guests arriving in 10 minutes. They're some of the most influential people in the city. CEO, politician, you name it." Lisa's heart began to race. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her nerves in check. "Are you sure I'm the right person for this, Karen? I mean, I'm just a student." Karen's warm smile cut through Lisa's doubts. "You're more than just a student, Lisa. You're one of our best servers, and I trust you completely. This could be a great opportunity for you." Lisa nodded, straightening her posture. She knew Karen was right. This was a chance to prove herself, to show that she could handle high-pressure situations. It was exactly the kind of experience that would serve her well in her future medical career. As she prepared the VIP table, arranging the finest china and crystal, Lisa's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe one of these guests would turn out to be a potential mentor or have connections to medical school scholarships. She quickly pushed the thought aside, reminding herself to focus on the task at hand. The VIP guests arrived in a flurry of designer clothing and expensive perfume. Lisa approached the table, her practiced smile in place. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Welcome to LeBlanc. My name is Lisa, and I'll be taking care of you this evening." As she distributed menus and recited the evening's specials, Lisa could feel the weight of the guests' scrutiny. She noticed their appraising glances, taking in her simple uniform and practical shoes. But instead of feeling intimidated, Lisa felt a surge of determination. She might not have their wealth or status, but she had something just as valuable: her unwavering work ethic and genuine care for others. Throughout the evening, Lisa navigated the complex orders and exacting demands of the VIP guests with grace and efficiency. She anticipated their needs, refilling water glasses before they were empty and discreetly replacing dropped napkins. Her medical training came in handy when one guest mentioned a food allergy, and Lisa was able to confidently discuss safe menu options with the chef. As the night progressed, Lisa's confidence grew. She overheard snippets of conversation about hospital boards and medical research, filing away the information for future reference. Though exhausted, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She was proving to herself, and to these influential guests, that she was capable of handling whatever challenges came her way. As Lisa cleared the last of the plates from the VIP table, a commotion at the restaurant entrance caught her attention. A group of young women, dressed in the latest designer fashions, sauntered in. At their center was Claire, a statuesque blonde whose confident stride and imperious gaze marked her as the leader. The maitre d' hurried to greet them, but Claire brushed past him, her eyes scanning the room. "We'll sit there," she declared, pointing to a prime table near the window. Lisa's heart sank as she realized the table was in her section. Taking a deep breath, she approached the group with a warm smile. "Good evening, ladies. Welcome to LeBlanc. I'm Lisa, and I'll be your server tonight." Claire's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched as she gave Lisa a once-over. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, how quaint," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Girls, look at this. A real-life Cinderella, except she never got invited to the ball." The other women tittered, their laughter sharp and cruel. Lisa felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her composure, determined not to let their words affect her. "Can I start you off with some water, or would you prefer to see our wine list?" Lisa asked, her voice steady. Claire leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving Lisa's face. "Water? Do we look like we drink tap water?" She snorted. "Bring us a bottle of your most expensive champagne. That is, if you even know what that is." Lisa nodded, turning to leave, but Claire wasn't finished. "Oh, and sweetie," she called out, "you might want to do something about those shoes. They're practically screaming clearance rack." More laughter erupted from the table. Lisa clenched her jaw, fighting back tears as she made her way to the bar. She could hear Claire's voice carrying across the restaurant, loud and mocking. "Can you believe they let people like that work here? I mean, really? What's next? Hiring from homeless shelters?" Lisa's hands shook as she reached for the champagne bottle. She closed her eyes for a moment, reminding herself of her goals, her dreams. These women, with their cruel words and shallow judgments, couldn't touch the person she was inside. With renewed determination, Lisa straightened her back and returned to the table, champagne in hand. She would serve these women with grace and professionalism, no matter how they treated her. After all, true strength wasn't about putting others down. It was about rising above, even in the face of adversity. As Lisa poured the champagne with practiced grace, Claire's eyes followed her every move, searching for any mistake to pounce on. The other women at the table whispered and giggled, their eyes darting between Claire and Lisa. "So, tell me," Claire said, her voice loud enough to carry across the restaurant, "how does someone like you end up in a place like this? I mean, surely they have standards." Lisa felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her voice steady. "We pride ourselves on excellent service here at LeBlanc. Is there anything else I can get for you ladies?" Claire laughed, a harsh sound that grated on Lisa's nerves. "Oh, sweetie, I wasn't talking about the restaurant. I meant you. Don't you feel out of place here?" The other diners were starting to take notice now, some looking uncomfortable, others openly staring. Lisa could feel their eyes on her, but she refused to let it shake her. "I assure you I'm quite capable of doing my job," Lisa replied calmly. Claire's smile turned predatory. "Oh, I'm sure you can carry plates just fine. But look around you. Do you really think you belong here, among people who actually matter?" The words stung, but Lisa held her ground. She thought of her textbooks waiting at home, of the long hours of study ahead of her. This job was just a stepping stone, not her final destination. "Your opinion is noted," Lisa said, her voice firm but polite. "Now, would you like to hear about our specials this evening?" Claire's eyes narrowed at Lisa's composure. Well, looks like the little waitress has some backbone after all. Tell me, Do they teach that in community college? Laughter erupted from the table again, louder this time. Other diners were openly watching now, some with sympathy in their eyes, others with cruel amusement. Lisa took a deep breath, reminding herself of her goals, of the future she was working towards. These women, with their designer clothes and cruel words, couldn't touch that. She was more than just a waitress. She was a future doctor, someone who would one day save lives. With that thought bolstering her, Lisa plastered on a professional smile. Our chef has prepared a wonderful truffle risotto this evening. Would you like to hear more about it? The tension in the air grew thick as Claire's attacks on Lisa became more pointed and cruel. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she refilled water glasses, but she kept her face calm and composed. "I bet she's only here because of some diversity quota," Claire said loudly, her eyes never leaving Lisa's face. "What do you think, girls? Affirmative action for waitresses?" The women at the table tittered nervously, some looking uncomfortable but none daring to challenge Claire. Lisa felt her chest tighten at the racist remark, but she kept her voice steady. "Is there anything else I can get for you, ma'am?" Lisa asked, her tone professional despite the hurt churning inside her. Claire's lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, I'm sure there's plenty you'd like to get. A better job, a life that actually matters. But let's face it, sweetie, this is probably as good as it gets for someone like you." The restaurant had grown eerily quiet. Other diners shifted in their seats, some casting sympathetic glances at Lisa, others pretending to be engrossed in their meals. But no one spoke up. No one came to her defense. Lisa felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She thought of her mother's words. "You're stronger than they know. Don't let them see you break." Claire, emboldened by the silence around her, pressed on. "I mean, really, what's your endgame here? Hoping some rich guy will take pity on you? Trust me, honey, that only happens in movies." Lisa's colleagues watched from a distance, their faces a mix of concern and helplessness. Even Karen, usually quick to intervene, seemed paralyzed by the presence of such influential guests. As the cruel words continued to flow, Lisa felt as if she were underwater, the sounds muffled and distorted. She focused on her breathing, on staying upright, on not letting these women see how deeply their words cut. The other patrons in the restaurant stirred uncomfortably in their seats. Some exchanged worried glances, others stared intently at their plates, but no one stepped forward to stop the onslaught of abuse. The atmosphere was charged with tension, a powder keg waiting to explode. Lisa approached the table once more, her notepad clutched tightly in her hand. Despite the cruel words still ringing in her ears, she managed a small smile. "Are you ready to order?" she asked, her voice steady. Claire rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, look who's back for more. I suppose you can't get enough of us, can you?" Lisa took a deep breath, focusing on her job. "Our chef's special today is the pan-seared salmon with lemon butter sauce." "As if we'd take recommendations from you," one of Claire's friends chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you even know what good food tastes like?" The group erupted in laughter, their eyes gleaming with malice. Lisa felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her composure. "I'll have the filet mignon," Claire said, barely looking at Lisa. "Medium rare. Try not to mess it up." Lisa nodded, jotting down the order. As she moved around the table, each of Claire's friends added their own barbed comments along with their orders. "Make sure you don't drip your poverty all over my plate," one sneered. "Do they teach you how to read in waitress school, or is that asking too much?" another added. With each cutting remark, Lisa felt a piece of her confidence chip away. But she remembered her dreams, her goals, and the people who believed in her. She wouldn't let these cruel women break her spirit. As Lisa collected the menus, Claire reached out and gripped her wrist, her manicured nails digging into Lisa's skin. "Listen, sweetie," she said, her voice low and menacing. "People like you will always be serving people like us. That's just how the world works. So you might as well get used to it." Lisa gently pulled her arm away, her heart pounding but her face betraying nothing. "I'll put your orders in right away," she said calmly, turning to leave. As she walked away, she could hear their mocking laughter behind her. But Lisa held her head high, her steps steady. She may be serving them now, but she knew in her heart that one day she'd be saving lives as a doctor, and that thought gave her the strength to endure their cruelty with grace and dignity. As the group's meals arrived, Claire's eyes gleamed with malice. She turned her attention back to Lisa, who was carefully placing the plates on the table. "So, Lisa," Claire said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Tell me, what's a girl like you doing in a place like this? Surely you have bigger dreams than being a waitress forever." Lisa hesitated, caught off guard by the personal question. "I'm actually studying to become a doctor," she replied softly, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's chatter. Claire's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "A doctor? You?" She let out a cruel laugh that echoed through the dining room. "Oh, honey, that's adorable. But let's be realistic here." The other diners in the restaurant began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, the tension palpable in the air. Lisa's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she stood her ground, determined not to let Claire see how much her words hurt. "Medicine is a noble profession," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I want to help people." Claire's friends exchanged amused glances, snickering behind their napkins. Claire leaned back in her chair, fixing Lisa with a cold stare. "Listen, sweetheart," she said, her voice low and cutting. "People like you don't become doctors. You'll never amount to anything more than this." She gestured dismissively at Lisa's uniform. "It's time you accepted your place in the world." Lisa felt a lump forming in her throat, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She blinked rapidly, desperately trying to maintain her composure. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, the silence broken only by the soft clink of cutlery and the muffled whispers of concerned patrons. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" Lisa managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire smirked, satisfied with the impact of her words. "No, I think you've done quite enough. Run along now." As Lisa turned to leave, she could feel the weight of dozens of sympathetic eyes on her back. She walked away with as much dignity as she could muster, her steps measured and careful. But inside, her heart was breaking, Claire's cruel words echoing in her mind. As Lisa retreated to the kitchen, trying to compose herself, a commotion erupted from Claire's table. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor and panicked voices filled the air. "Claire, what's wrong?" one of her friends cried out. Lisa turned to see Claire gasping for air, her face flushed and her eyes wide with fear. The socialite clutched at her throat, struggling to breathe. Her friends hovered around her, their faces pale with shock and confusion. "Someone help!" another friend shouted, her voice shrill with panic. Without hesitation, Lisa rushed back to the table. Her medical training kicked in, overriding her hurt feelings from moments before. She quickly assessed the situation, recognizing the signs of a severe allergic reaction. "Claire, can you hear me?" Lisa asked firmly, kneeling beside the choking woman. Claire nodded weakly, her eyes filled with terror. Lisa turned to the group. "Does anyone have an EpiPen?" The friends looked at each other blankly, shaking their heads. Lisa's mind raced, knowing every second counted. "I need the first aid kit now," she called out to her co-workers. A busboy sprinted to retrieve it. Lisa gently but firmly guided Claire to sit up straight. "Try to stay calm, Claire. I'm here to help you." The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes on the unfolding drama. Lisa's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the panic surrounding her. As the busboy returned with the first aid kit, Lisa quickly found what she needed. "This might hurt a little," she warned Claire, who could only nod in response. With practiced precision, Lisa administered the emergency medication. The effect was almost immediate. Claire's breathing began to ease, the color slowly returning to her face. "You're going to be okay," Lisa reassured her, holding her hand. "Just keep taking slow, deep breaths." As Claire's condition stabilized, her friends looked on in awe. The woman who had been so cruel just minutes ago now clung to Lisa's hand like a lifeline. As Lisa continued to monitor Claire's condition, the restaurant remained in a state of hushed tension. The other diners watched in awe as the young waitress, who had been the target of cruel mockery just moments ago, now worked tirelessly to save her tormentor's life. "You're doing great, Claire," Lisa said softly, her voice steady and reassuring. "Just keep breathing slowly. Help is on the way." Claire's friends huddled nearby, their faces a mix of shock, guilt, and confusion. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure of how to reconcile their earlier behavior with Lisa's selfless actions now. Is she going to be okay?" one of them asked timidly. Lisa nodded without taking her eyes off Claire. "The medication is working, but she'll need to go to the hospital for further treatment." The sound of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of the paramedics. As they burst through the restaurant doors, Lisa calmly briefed them on Claire's condition and the steps she had taken. "You did an excellent job," one of the paramedics praised Lisa as they prepared to take over. As Claire was carefully transferred onto a stretcher, her eyes locked with Lisa's. There was a flicker of something new in them, a mix of gratitude, shame, and wonder. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the paramedics wheeled Claire out, her friends trailing behind like lost puppies. The contrast between the earlier scene of cruelty and the current moment of life-saving compassion was palpable. As the doors closed behind the ambulance crew, the restaurant remained eerily quiet. All eyes turned to Lisa, who stood alone, her uniform slightly rumpled, her face flushed from the intensity of the moment. She had just saved the life of the woman who, minutes earlier, had tried to tear her down. As the ambulance sirens faded into the distance, Claire's friends stood awkwardly in the restaurant, their faces a mix of shame and confusion. They looked at each other, then at Lisa, who was quietly tidying up the table where the drama had unfolded. One of the women, a tall blonde in a designer dress, stepped forward hesitantly. Lisa?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa turned, her face composed but tired. "Yes?" she replied softly. The woman fumbled with her words. We just wanted to say thank you for saving Claire's life. We don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Lisa nodded, a small smile on her face. "I'm just glad I could help," she said simply. Another friend, a man in an expensive suit, pulled out his wallet. "Please," he said, holding out a thick wad of cash. "Take this. It's the least we can do after everything." Lisa looked at the money, then back at the group. Their faces were filled with regret and embarrassment. She took a deep breath and gently pushed the man's hand away. "That's very kind of you," she said, her voice warm but firm. "But I don't need a reward for doing what's right. I'm just happy Claire will be okay." The group looked stunned. They had never imagined someone turning down such a large sum of money, especially someone they had assumed was struggling financially. Lisa turned back to the table, continuing to clean up. "If you'd like to do something," she added over her shoulder, "you could consider donating to the hospital's scholarship fund for aspiring medical students. That would help a lot of people like me." The friends exchanged glances, nodding slowly as they absorbed Lisa's words. They quietly left the restaurant, their earlier arrogance replaced by a newfound respect for the waitress they had so cruelly mocked. As Lisa moved through the restaurant, she could feel the change in the atmosphere. The other diners, who had witnessed both the bullying and the life-saving act, looked at her with a mix of admiration and awe. Some even stood up to shake her hand or pat her on the back as she passed. The next morning, Victoria sat in her plush apartment, sipping coffee and staring out the window. Her mind kept replaying the events from the previous night. The cruel words, Lisa's grace under pressure, and the life-saving moment that changed everything. A knot of guilt tightened in her stomach. She picked up her phone and dialed Claire's number. After a few rings, Claire answered, her voice groggy. "Hey, Victoria, what's up?" Claire mumbled. Victoria took a deep breath. "Claire, we need to talk about what happened last night." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice defensive. "What's there to talk about? That waitress saved my life. End of story." Victoria sighed. "It's not that simple, Claire. We treated her horribly. Don't you think we owe her a proper apology?" "An apology?" Claire scoffed. "Why? She did her job." "No, Claire," Victoria said firmly. "She did more than her job. She saved your life after we humiliated her. We need to make this right." Claire fell silent again. Victoria could almost hear the wheels turning in her friend's head. "I think we should go back to the restaurant," Victoria suggested gently. "We need to apologize to Lisa, face to face." "Are you kidding?" Claire's voice rose. "I can't show my face there again. It's embarrassing." Victoria's voice softened. "I know it's hard, Claire, but it's the right thing to do. We were wrong, and Lisa deserves our apology." There was a long silence on the line. Victoria held her breath, waiting for Claire's response. Finally, Claire let out a heavy sigh. "Fine," she said reluctantly, "but you're doing the talking." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Okay," she agreed. "I'll call the others and we'll meet at the restaurant this afternoon." As she hung up the phone, Victoria felt a glimmer of hope. It was a small step, but it was a start towards making amends for their cruel behavior. That afternoon, Victoria, Claire, and their friends arrived at the luxury hotel restaurant. The group hesitated at the entrance, exchanging nervous glances. Victoria took a deep breath and led the way inside. The restaurant was bustling with the lunch crowd. As they entered, they spotted Lisa efficiently moving between tables, her face calm and focused. Victoria caught the manager's eye and motioned towards Lisa. The manager nodded and approached Lisa, whispering something in her ear. Lisa looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she saw the group. She took a moment to compose herself before walking over to them, her steps measured and deliberate. "Hello," Lisa said politely, her voice steady. "How can I help you today?" Victoria stepped forward, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Lisa, we came to apologize for our behavior last night. What we did was cruel and unacceptable." Lisa's expression remained neutral as Victoria continued. "We were wrong to treat you that way. You showed incredible kindness and professionalism even when we didn't deserve it." The other friends nodded in agreement, murmuring their own apologies. Claire, however, stood slightly apart, her arms crossed and her gaze fixed on the floor. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Claire finally spoke. "Yeah, sorry about that," she muttered, her tone flat and unconvincing. She glanced up briefly, meeting Lisa's eyes for a split second before looking away again. Lisa took a deep breath, her hands clasped in front of her. "I appreciate your apologies," she said calmly. "Thank you for coming back to say this." Despite her words, Lisa's body language remained guarded. She maintained a polite distance from the group, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. It was clear she didn't expect this apology to lead to any real change in their attitudes or behavior. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" Lisa asked, her tone professional but distant. Victoria shook her head, realizing that their presence was likely making Lisa uncomfortable. "No, that's all. Thank you for listening to us, Lisa." As the group turned to leave, Lisa returned to her work, her posture straight and her face composed. She didn't look back at them, instead focusing on her next table with unwavering professionalism. As the group filed out of the restaurant, Victoria hesitated. She glanced back at Lisa, who was already busy clearing a nearby table. Taking a deep breath, Victoria turned and walked back towards her. "Lisa," Victoria said softly, "could I speak with you for a moment, in private?" Lisa looked up, surprise flickering across her face. She nodded slowly, leading Victoria to a quiet corner of the restaurant. "What is it?" Lisa asked, her voice cautious. Victoria fidgeted with her hands, then looked Lisa in the eye. I wanted to tell you something. My father runs a healthcare foundation. We offer scholarships to promising medical students." Lisa's eyes widened, but she remained silent as Victoria continued. "After what happened last night, how you saved Claire despite everything, it really moved me. I've never seen anyone act with such kindness and skill under pressure." Victoria took a deep breath. "I'd like to help you with a medical school scholarship. You deserve it, Lisa. Your compassion and talent shouldn't go to waste because of financial struggles." Lisa stood there, stunned. Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she found her voice. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Victoria smiled gently. You don't have to say anything right now. I know it's a lot to take in. Lisa's brow furrowed, conflict clear on her face. That's incredibly generous of you, Victoria. But I'm not sure if I should accept. It feels wrong, somehow, after everything that's happened. Victoria nodded understandingly. I get it. Take some time to think about it. This offer isn't going anywhere. She pulled out a business card and handed it to Lisa. Here's my contact information. When you're ready to talk about it, just give me a call. Lisa took the card with trembling hands, staring at it as if it might disappear. Thank you, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Lisa trudged up the stairs to her small apartment, her mind swirling with thoughts of the day's events. As she unlocked her door and stepped inside, she let out a deep sigh, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. She tossed her keys onto the small table by the door and sank into her worn, second-hand couch. The business card Victoria had given her felt heavy in her pocket. Lisa pulled it out, staring at the embossed letters that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of her apartment. A scholarship, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, a chance to focus on her studies without the constant worry of how to pay for tuition or make rent. But as Lisa turned the card over in her hands, memories of Claire's cruel laughter and cutting remarks flooded back. The sting of humiliation was still fresh, making her cheeks burn with shame and anger. How can I accept help from people who treated me like that? Lisa wondered aloud, her voice cracking slightly. She closed her eyes, trying to sort through her jumbled emotions. On one hand, the scholarship could change her life. On the other, accepting it felt like letting those who had hurt her win somehow. Lisa shook her head, frustrated by her own conflicting thoughts. Taking a deep breath, Lisa stood up and walked to her small desk. She pinned Victoria's card to her corkboard, right next to her class schedule and work roster. For now, she decided, she would focus on what she could control, her studies and her job. Lisa pulled out her textbooks and notebook, determined to lose herself in the familiar comfort of medical terminology and case studies. As she began to review her notes from the day's lectures, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. One day at a time, Lisa murmured to herself, her pen moving steadily across the page. She had come this far on her own strength and determination. Whatever decision she made about the scholarship could wait. For now, she would keep pushing forward just as she always had. Meanwhile, back at her lavish penthouse apartment, Claire paced restlessly across the plush carpet of her living room. The events of the past few days played on repeat in her mind, like a movie she couldn't turn off. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lisa's face, calm and determined, as she saved Claire's life. The guilt that had been gnawing at Claire's inside since that night grew stronger with each passing hour. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the twinkling city lights below, but finding no comfort in the view she usually loved. Why did I treat her like that? Claire whispered to herself, her breath fogging up the glass. She pressed her forehead against the cool surface, trying to make sense of her own actions. For the first time in her life, Claire found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. The image she had carefully cultivated, the confident, untouchable socialite, suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. As she turned away from the window, her eyes fell on a framed photo of her family. Her parents stood tall and proud, their expectations for Claire almost palpable even in the still image. Claire picked up the frame, running her fingers over the glass. Is this why? She wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Have I been so afraid of disappointing them that I became this? The realization hit Claire like a physical blow. She sank onto her designer couch, still clutching the photo. Her behavior towards Lisa hadn't just been about arrogance or superiority. It had been driven by something much deeper. The constant pressure to be perfect, to live up to her family's impossibly high standards, had twisted her into someone she barely recognized. Tears began to fall, leaving wet spots on the expensive fabric of her dress. Claire didn't bother to wipe them away. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry freely, mourning the person she had become and the kindness she had lost along the way. The next evening, Claire found herself standing outside the restaurant, her heart pounding nervously in her chest. She hadn't planned to come here, but something inside her had pulled her back to this place. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries filled the air. Claire's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Lisa, who was busy clearing a table near the back. For a moment, Claire hesitated, second-guessing her decision to come. But before she could change her mind, her feet were already carrying her towards Lisa. Hi?" Claire said softly, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. Lisa looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "Oh, hello," she replied, her tone polite but guarded. Claire fidgeted with the strap of her designer handbag. I wanted to thank you properly for saving my life the other night." Lisa nodded, her expression unreadable. "You're welcome. I'm glad you're okay." An awkward silence fell between them. Claire scrambled for something to say, anything to keep the conversation going. "So, how long have you been working here?" she asked, wincing internally at how forced it sounded. "About a year now," Lisa answered, her voice neutral. Claire nodded, desperately trying to think of what to say next. "The coffee here is really good," she blurted out, immediately feeling foolish. A flicker of something, amusement maybe, passed over Lisa's face. "Yes, it is," she agreed. As they stood there, Claire felt an inexplicable urge to keep talking, to somehow bridge the vast gap between them. But Lisa's guarded demeanor made it clear that she was wary of Claire's sudden interest. "I'm sorry about how I treated you before," Claire said softly, her eyes downcast. "It was cruel and completely uncalled for." Lisa's expression softened slightly, but she remained cautious. "Thank you for apologizing," she said carefully. Claire nodded, understanding Lisa's hesitation. She knew it would take more than one awkward conversation to make up for her past behavior. But something about Lisa drew her in, made her want to try. As they stood there in the quiet corner of the restaurant, Claire felt a lump forming in her throat. She hadn't planned on opening up, but something about Lisa's calm presence made her want to explain herself. I've never really had to work for anything," Claire began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My whole life, everything's been handed to me on a silver platter." Lisa listened silently, her expression softening slightly as she saw the vulnerability in Claire's eyes. "But with all that comes so much pressure," Claire continued, her voice cracking. "I always have to be perfect to live up to my family's expectations. It's like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of disappointing everyone." Claire's eyes began to well up with tears. She tried to blink them away, but they spilled over, trickling down her cheeks. I guess I was cruel to you because I was jealous," she admitted, her voice trembling. Lisa's eyebrows raised in surprise. "Jealous? Of me?" Claire nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're so kind, even when people treat you horribly. You work so hard for your dreams, and you don't let anything stop you. I wish I could be like that." The tears were flowing freely now, and Claire didn't try to stop them. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you. You didn't deserve any of it." Lisa stood there, stunned by Claire's sudden outpouring of emotion. She had never expected to see this side of the woman who had been so cruel to her just days ago. "I envy people like you, Lisa," Claire continued, her voice barely audible through her tears. "People who can stay kind and strong, even when life is hard. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be a good person when everything around me feels like it's falling apart." Lisa stood there, taking in Claire's tearful confession. Her heart softened as she watched the once haughty woman crumble before her eyes. For a moment she was silent, processing the unexpected turn of events. Finally, Lisa took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Claire, I understand how you feel. We all face pressure and fear in our lives. But those feelings don't have to control us or make us cruel to others." Claire looked up, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Lisa continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Kindness isn't something that just happens to us. It's a choice we make every day. even when things are tough. Lisa paused, thinking back to her own struggles. I've had my share of hard times too. There were days when I wanted to give up or lash out at others. But I learned that being kind, especially when it's difficult, makes me stronger. Claire listened intently, hanging on to every word. Lisa went on. When we let fear and pain drive our actions, we only end up hurting ourselves and others. But when we choose kindness, we create a better world around us. As Lisa spoke, Claire felt something shift inside her. It was as if a heavy weight was lifting from her shoulders. She had never thought about kindness as a choice before, always assuming it was something people were born with or without. But how? Claire asked, her voice small and uncertain. How do you stay kind when everything feels so hard? Lisa smiled softly. It's not always easy, she admitted. But I try to remember that everyone is fighting their own battles. When I'm tempted to be mean or selfish, I take a deep breath and ask myself if that's really the person I want to be. Claire nodded slowly, absorbing Lisa's words. For the first time in her life, she felt a glimmer of hope that she could change, that she wasn't doomed to be the person her fears and insecurities had shaped her into. Thank you, Lisa, Claire whispered, wiping away the last of her tears. I never thought I'd say this, but I think I have a lot to learn from you. Lisa reached out and gently squeezed Claire's arm. We all have something to learn from each other. That's what makes life beautiful. As the conversation drew to a close, Claire fidgeted nervously with her hands. She looked at Lisa, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Lisa, she began hesitantly, I know I don't deserve your kindness after how I treated you, but I want to learn. I want to be better. Lisa listened patiently, her expression open and encouraging. Claire took a deep breath and continued. You mentioned you volunteer at a community clinic. I was wondering, would it be okay if I joined you there sometime? I want to see firsthand how you help people and maybe learn a thing or two about kindness and service. Lisa's eyebrows raised in surprise. She hadn't expected this from Claire, but she could see the sincerity in the other woman's eyes. For a moment, she considered the request carefully. Part of her was still wary, remembering the cruel words Claire had thrown at her just days ago. But another part of her, the part that believed in second chances, felt a glimmer of hope. After a thoughtful pause, Lisa nodded slowly. You know, Claire, I think that could be a good idea. The clinic is always in need of extra hands. She smiled softly, adding, and it might be an eye-opening experience for you. Claire's face lit up with relief and excitement. Really? You mean it? Oh, thank you, Lisa. I promise I won't let you down. Lisa held up a hand, her expression turning serious. I appreciate your enthusiasm, Claire, but I want you to understand something. The people we help at the clinic are often going through tough times. They deserve respect and compassion no matter their circumstances. Can you promise me you'll approach this with an open mind and a kind heart? Claire nodded earnestly. I promise, Lisa. I want to learn and do better. I know I have a lot of work to do, but I'm ready to start. Lisa felt a cautious optimism bloom in her chest. She knew it wouldn't be easy for Claire to change overnight, but her willingness to try was a start. All right then, she said with a gentle smile. I volunteer there on Saturdays. Why don't you join me this weekend? Claire agreed enthusiastically, and they made plans to meet at the clinic. As they parted ways that night, both women felt a sense of possibility in the air. Lisa hoped that this experience would truly open Claire's eyes to a different way of living, while Claire felt a mix of nervousness and excitement about the journey ahead. As Saturday morning arrived, Claire found herself standing nervously outside the community clinic. The building was modest, a far cry from the luxurious spaces she was used to. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her simple blouse and jeans, an outfit she hoped wouldn't stand out too much. Lisa greeted her with a warm smile. Ready? She asked, and Claire nodded, following her inside. The clinic bustled with activity. Patients of all ages filled the waiting room, some looking tired, others anxious. Claire felt a twinge of discomfort, realizing she'd never been in a place quite like this before. As they walked through the corridors, Lisa explained the clinic's mission and introduced Claire to the staff. Claire was struck by how kind and patient everyone seemed, despite the clear stress of their work. Then came the moment Claire had both anticipated and dreaded, meeting the patients. She watched in awe as Lisa interacted with each person, her voice gentle and her touch comforting. Whether it was a child with a fever or an elderly man struggling with chronic pain, Lisa treated everyone with the same level of care and respect. One interaction in particular touched Claire deeply. A young mother came in, clearly exhausted, with a sick baby in her arms. Lisa not only examined the child but also asked about the mother's well-being, offering words of encouragement and support. As Claire observed, she felt a wave of shame wash over her. She remembered her cruel words to Lisa at the restaurant, how she had mocked her for being just a waitress. Now, seeing Lisa in her element, Claire realized how wrong she had been. Lisa wasn't just a doctor in training, she was a beacon of hope for these people. Throughout the day, Claire helped where she could, mostly with simple tasks like organizing supplies or comforting waiting patients. Each small act of kindness, each grateful smile she received, chipped away at her old beliefs about status and worth. By the end of the shift, Claire felt both emotionally drained and strangely uplifted. As they were preparing to leave, she turned to Lisa, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Lisa, I don't know what to say. The way you care for these people, it's incredible. I feel so ashamed of how I treated you before." That evening, Claire gathered her friends at their favorite upscale cafe, her eyes bright with excitement. As they settled into plush seats, sipping their lattes, she couldn't contain her enthusiasm any longer. "You guys, I have to tell you about my day at the clinic," Claire blurted out, her words tumbling over each other. It was eye-opening." Her friends exchanged puzzled glances. Brittany raised an eyebrow. "The clinic? You mean that place where Lisa works?" Claire nodded eagerly. "Yes, exactly. I volunteered there today and it was incredible." She launched into a detailed account of her experience, describing the patients she'd met and the work Lisa did. As she spoke, her voice grew softer, filled with a newfound respect. "You should have seen Lisa," Claire said, shaking her head in wonder. "The way she cared for everyone. It was amazing. I've never seen anything like it." Victoria leaned forward, her eyes shining. "That sounds wonderful, Claire. I'm so glad you had this experience." But not everyone was as receptive, Brittany scoffed, twirling her hair around her finger. "I don't get it. Why would you want to spend time in a place like that? It sounds dirty." Claire felt a flash of anger, surprising herself. "It's not about that, Brittany. It's about helping people who really need it. I want to do more. I want to volunteer there regularly." Her declaration was met with stunned silence. Then Victoria spoke up, her voice filled with warmth. "I think that's great, Claire. Maybe I could join you sometime?" Claire beamed at her friend, grateful for the support. "I'd love that, Victoria. There's so much we could do to help." As Claire continued to share her plans, she noticed the varying reactions of her friends. Some, like Brittany, looked skeptical and uncomfortable. Others seemed curious, if a bit uncertain. But Victoria's eyes sparkled with inspiration, nodding along as Claire spoke. "I know it's a big change," Claire admitted, looking around at her friends. "But I really want to make a difference. This feels right." Meanwhile, Lisa sat at her small desk in her tiny apartment, surrounded by textbooks and notes. The soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated her determined face as she pored over her medical texts. Despite the late hour, her eyes were bright with focus and purpose. As she studied, her mind wandered to the events of the past few weeks. The incident with Claire had been a turning point, not just for the socialite, but for Lisa herself. She paused, tapping her pen against her chin, lost in thought. "Who would have thought?" she murmured to herself, shaking her head in wonder. Lisa had always believed in the power of kindness, but seeing its effect on Claire had reinforced that belief tenfold. She remembered the look in Claire's eyes at the clinic, the genuine amazement and growing compassion. It was a far cry from the cruel, mocking gaze she had first encountered. A small smile played on Lisa's lips as she thought about her own journey. The humiliation she had felt that night in the restaurant seemed like a distant memory now. In its place was a sense of pride and strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I didn't let it break me," Lisa whispered, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "I stood my ground, and look what happened." She glanced at the scholarship application on her desk, the one Victoria had encouraged her to fill out. At first, Lisa had been hesitant to accept help from Claire's circle, but after much reflection, she realized that accepting help didn't diminish her own hard work and determination. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," Lisa mused, picking up the application. "It means moving forward and allowing for change." With renewed energy, Lisa turned back to her studies. The path ahead was still challenging, but she felt more prepared than ever to face it. The incident with Claire had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways life could change. As she flipped through her textbook, Lisa felt a surge of gratitude. Despite the initial pain, the experience had ultimately made her stronger and more confident in her chosen path. The next morning, Lisa's phone buzzed with an incoming email. She rubbed her eyes, still groggy from a late night of studying, and reached for her device. As she read the message, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The email was from Victoria's father, formally offering Lisa a full scholarship to medical school through his foundation. The words on the screen blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. It was an opportunity beyond her wildest dreams. Lisa sat on the edge of her bed, her mind racing. She thought about all the long nights she'd spent working and studying, the sacrifices she'd made, and the challenges she'd faced. This scholarship could change everything. But a small voice of doubt crept in. Was it right to accept this offer, given how it came about? Lisa remembered the humiliation she'd felt that night in the restaurant, and for a moment, her pride bristled at the idea of accepting help from people who had once looked down on her. Taking a deep breath, Lisa stood up and walked to her tiny kitchen. As she made herself a cup of coffee, she reflected on the events of the past few weeks. She thought about Claire's transformation, Victoria's kindness, and her own growth through the experience. "Accepting help doesn't make me weak," Lisa said aloud, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It's just another step toward my goal." She realized that this scholarship wasn't charity or pity. It was an acknowledgement of her hard work, her compassion, and her potential as a future doctor. By accepting it, she would be able to focus fully on her studies and become the best physician she could be. With a newfound sense of clarity, Lisa sat down at her desk and began composing her reply. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she expressed her gratitude and accepted the offer. As she hit send, a wave of excitement and relief washed over her. Lisa leaned back in her chair, a broad smile spreading across her face. She felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The path ahead was still challenging, but now she had the support she needed to pursue her dreams without compromise. Lisa's hands trembled as she dialed her parents' number. Her heart raced with excitement, eager to share the life-changing news. As the phone rang, she paced back and forth in her tiny apartment, her mind swirling with emotions. "Hello?" her mother's warm voice answered. "Mom, is Dad there too? Can you put me on speaker? I have something important to tell you both," Lisa said, her voice quivering with anticipation. Once her parents were both on the line, Lisa took a deep breath and shared the news about her scholarship. I got a full scholarship to medical school," she exclaimed, her voice breaking with joy. There was a moment of stunned silence followed by a burst of excitement from both her parents. Her mother's happy sobs mixed with her father's proud laughter, filling Lisa's ears with the sweetest sound she'd ever heard. "Oh, sweetheart, we're so proud of you," her mother cried. "You've worked so hard for this." Her father chimed in, his voice thick with emotion. "Lisa, do you remember when you were just a little girl, playing doctor with your stuffed animals? Look at you now, about to become a real doctor." Lisa felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to her parents' words of love and encouragement. They reminded her of all the obstacles she had overcome, the long nights studying, the exhausting double shifts at the restaurant, the countless times she doubted herself but pushed through anyway. "You've always had such a big heart, Lisa," her mother said softly. "Even when things were tough, you never stopped caring for others. That's what will make you an amazing doctor." Her father added, "And now, with this scholarship, you can focus on your studies and become the best doctor you can be. Just think of all the lives you'll touch, all the people you'll help." Lisa nodded, wiping away her tears. "I promise I'll make you proud," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Oh, honey," her mother replied, "you already have. And we know you'll keep making us proud, not just by becoming a doctor, but by being the kind, compassionate person you've always been." Claire's heart raced as she entered the community clinic, following Lisa's confident steps. The sterile smell and bustling atmosphere were still unfamiliar, but Claire felt a growing sense of purpose with each visit. As they walked through the crowded waiting room, Lisa greeted patients with warm smiles and gentle touches. Claire watched in awe, amazed at how Lisa's presence seemed to bring comfort to those around her. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," Lisa said, kneeling beside an elderly woman. "How are you feeling today?" Claire observed the tender interaction, her eyes welling with tears. She thought about how she used to treat people like Lisa and felt a pang of shame. But here, in this clinic, she was learning to be a different person. Later that day, Claire met her friends for lunch at their usual upscale restaurant. As they settled into their seats, Victoria noticed a change in Claire's demeanor. "You seem different, Claire," Victoria remarked. "Is everything okay?" Claire took a deep breath and smiled. "Actually, everything's better than okay. I've been volunteering at the community clinic with Lisa, and it's changing me." Her friends exchanged surprised glances. Claire continued, her voice filled with newfound passion. "I've seen so much there. People struggling, but also so much kindness. It's made me realize how much we could do to help." She looked around the table, meeting each of her friends' eyes. "I think we should all get involved in some kind of charitable work. We have so much, and there are so many people who need help." Victoria's face lit up. "That's a wonderful idea, Claire. My father's foundation is always looking for volunteers. Maybe we could start there." The other friends nodded hesitantly, intrigued by Claire's transformation. As they discussed potential volunteer opportunities, Claire felt a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of something truly meaningful. Over the next few weeks, Claire and Victoria threw themselves into philanthropic activities. They organized fundraisers, volunteered at soup kitchens, and even started mentoring underprivileged youth. Victoria paced nervously in her spacious living room, phone in hand. She took a deep breath and dialed Lisa's number. As the phone rang, Victoria's mind raced with thoughts of the upcoming fundraiser she was planning for the clinic. "Hello?" Lisa's warm voice answered. "Lisa." "Hi, it's Victoria," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all," Lisa replied. "What's up?" Victoria took another deep breath. "Well, I've been working on organizing a big fundraiser for the clinic, and I was hoping you'd be our guest of honor." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Victoria could almost feel Lisa's hesitation through the phone. "Me?" Lisa finally asked, her voice filled with surprise. "I don't know, Victoria. I'm not really comfortable being in the spotlight like that." Victoria's heart sank, but she pressed on. "I understand, but Lisa, your story is so inspiring. You've touched so many lives, not just at the clinic, but in our community. People need to hear about the amazing work you do." Lisa remained quiet, considering Victoria's words. Victoria continued, her voice growing more passionate. "Think about how much good this could do for the clinic. The money we raise could help so many people who need it." After what felt like an eternity, Lisa spoke. "You're right," she said softly. "If it can help the clinic, I'll do it." Victoria beamed, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Lisa. You won't regret this, I promise." Over the next few weeks, Victoria threw herself into planning the event. She secured a beautiful venue, reached out to potential donors, and worked tirelessly to ensure everything would be perfect. As the day of the fundraiser approached, Victoria's excitement grew. She could feel that this event was going to be something special. Not only would it raise much-needed funds for the clinic, but it would also shine a light on the incredible work being done there. The night before the event, Victoria sat in her study, going over the final details. She smiled to herself, thinking about how far they had all come. From that terrible night at the restaurant to now, planning a charity event together. It was more than she could have ever imagined. The night of the fundraiser arrived and the elegant ballroom buzzed with excitement. Soft music played as guests in their finest attire mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the beautifully decorated space. Victoria stood near the entrance, greeting people with a warm smile, her eyes occasionally darting to the door in anticipation of Lisa's arrival. When Lisa finally walked in, Victoria's face lit up. She rushed over to greet her friend, giving her a quick hug. "You look beautiful," Victoria said, taking in Lisa's simple yet elegant dress. Lisa blushed, looking a bit overwhelmed. "Thanks," she said softly. "I'm still not sure about all this." Victoria squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You'll do great. Just be yourself." As the evening progressed, the time came for speeches. Victoria took the stage first, welcoming everyone and explaining the importance of the clinic's work. Then, with a deep breath, she introduced Claire. Claire walked to the podium, her hands shaking slightly. She looked out at the sea of faces, her eyes finding Lisa's in the crowd. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm here tonight to talk about someone very special, someone who not only saved my life but also changed it forever." The room fell silent as Claire recounted the night at the restaurant, her voice thick with emotion. "I was cruel and heartless," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But Lisa showed me kindness I didn't deserve." Claire's voice grew stronger as she continued. "When I was choking, unable to breathe, it was Lisa who rushed to my aid. She saved my life that night, but she did so much more than that. She showed me what true strength and compassion look like." The audience listened intently, many wiping away tears of their own. Claire's raw honesty touched everyone in the room. "Lisa," Claire said, looking directly at her now, "you didn't just save me physically. You helped me find a new path in life. You taught me the value of kindness, of giving back. You showed me that true worth isn't measured by wealth or status, but by how we treat others." Claire's voice cracked as she finished. "Thank you, Lisa. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for saving me in every way possible." As Claire finished her emotional speech, the room erupted in applause. Lisa sat stunned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She felt a gentle nudge from Victoria, encouraging her to take the stage. With a deep breath, Lisa stood and made her way to the podium. The room fell silent as she looked out at the sea of faces, all waiting expectantly. She cleared her throat and began to speak, her voice soft but clear. "Thank you, Claire, for those kind words," Lisa said, her eyes meeting Claire's briefly. "When I think about that night at the restaurant, I'm reminded of a simple truth. We never truly know what someone else is going through." Lisa paused, gathering her thoughts. It would have been easy to judge Claire based on her actions that night, but life has taught me that kindness and forgiveness are far more powerful than judgment or resentment. The audience listened intently as Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger. "We all face struggles, whether we're serving tables or sitting at them. The real measure of a person isn't in their circumstances, but in how they treat others, especially when it's difficult." Lisa's eyes scanned the room, making brief connections with different faces. Forgiveness isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. It frees not just the person being forgiven, but also the one doing the forgiving. She smiled softly, her words touching hearts across the room. Claire's transformation is a beautiful reminder that change is always possible. It shows us that a single act of kindness can ripple out and touch countless lives. As Lisa spoke, many in the audience nodded, some wiping away tears. Her simple yet profound words resonated deeply. "So tonight," Lisa concluded, her voice filled with warmth. "I want to challenge all of us. Let's look beyond appearances and circumstances. Let's choose kindness, even when it's hard. Because in doing so, we don't just change others, we change ourselves." The room burst into applause as Lisa finished, her words leaving a lasting impact on everyone present. The power of her message, delivered with such grace and wisdom, had touched hearts and inspired minds. The fundraiser ended on a high note, with donations pouring in from all corners of the room. Lisa's heartfelt speech had moved many to open their wallets and hearts. By the end of the night, the clinic had received enough funding to support its operations for years to come. As the event wound down, Lisa found herself surrounded by well-wishers and admirers. People lined up to shake her hand, thanking her for her inspiring words. Some even pressed business cards into her palm, eager to have her speak at their own events. Lisa smiled graciously, accepting their kind words with humility. But even as the praise washed over her, her mind remained fixed on her true goal. She knew that this sudden attention, while flattering, was just a detour on her path to becoming a doctor. In the days that followed, Lisa's inbox filled with invitations to speak at various events. Corporations, schools, and charitable organizations all wanted to hear her story. It was tempting, she had to admit. The idea of inspiring others and potentially raising more funds for good causes was appealing. But Lisa remained steadfast in her priorities. She politely declined most of the invitations, explaining that her studies had to come first. She chose to accept only a few speaking engagements, carefully selecting those that wouldn't interfere with her rigorous academic schedule. At medical school, Lisa threw herself into her studies with renewed vigor. The scholarship from Victoria's father's foundation had eased her financial burden, allowing her to focus fully on her coursework. She spent long hours in the library poring over textbooks and medical journals, determined to excel in her classes. Despite her growing local fame, Lisa remained the same humble, hard-working student her classmates had always known. She continued to volunteer at the clinic whenever she could, finding joy in helping those in need. To her, this hands-on experience was far more valuable than any speaking engagement. Years passed, and Lisa's dedication to her studies never wavered. Through late nights and early mornings, she persevered, her dream of becoming a doctor growing closer with each passing day. The support from the foundation eased her financial burden, allowing her to focus entirely on her education. Finally, the day arrived. Lisa stood tall in her cap and gown, her heart swelling with pride as she accepted her medical degree. As she looked out into the audience, she saw familiar faces beaming back at her. Her family, teary-eyed and bursting with joy, sat in the front row. And there, just a few seats away, was Claire, clapping enthusiastically. After the ceremony, Claire rushed to embrace Lisa. "You did it!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine happiness. "I'm so proud of you." Lisa hugged her back, marveling at how far they'd both come. What had started as a moment of cruelty had blossomed into a friendship neither of them could have imagined. As they chatted, Claire shared her latest philanthropic endeavors. She had continued her volunteer work at the clinic and had even started a mentorship program for underprivileged youth interested in healthcare careers. "You inspired me," Claire admitted, her eyes shining. "I want to make a difference just like you do." Lisa felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that her journey had not only changed her life but had rippled out to touch others as well. The kindness she had shown, even in the face of adversity, had sparked a transformation in Claire and inspired a community. As the celebration continued around them, Lisa took a moment to reflect. She thought about the scared, uncertain waitress she had once been, and the confident, compassionate doctor she had become. Through it all, she had stayed true to her values, never letting hardship harden her heart. Lisa knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. With her medical degree in hand and a supportive community behind her, she was ready to make a real difference in the world. And she would do it with the same kindness and humility that had brought her this far. If you enjoyed the story of Lisa and Claire, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.